This video is brought to you by mybookie.ag. What's up guys, we are here for the massive UFC 291 card, the second pay-per-view of July, and it's stacked. There's a lot of great fights, good prospects, but most of the fighters on this card are veterans. It's going to be headlined by the rematch of Dustin Poirier versus Justin Gaethje, which is not going to have an official undisputed title, but it's going to have the BMF belt. So the winner of that is going to be the BMF of the UFC, and both fighters are actually pretty excited that the belt is on the line. I know Dustin's friend Jorge Masvidal was the origin of that belt, and that's his training partner. And as for Gaethje, I guess he just likes to have some kind of trophy for his status as one of the most exciting fighters in the UFC. Blachowicz versus Alex Pereira is the co-main event. The winner of this fight is most likely to get into a title shot, and for me, it's my most anticipated fight of the whole card. Blachowicz versus Pereira is very interesting because it could go down in different ways. The fight is probably going to be rather one-sided though. Whether Blachowicz takes him down and controls him the whole time and then submits him, or Alex Pereira just clearly beats him in the striking. It is the light heavyweight division, anything could happen. Both guys have tremendous power. That's going to be a very fun fight. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson versus Michel Pereira is the kind of fight that Wonderboy has been asking for. He doesn't want to fight grapplers. He doesn't want to fight guys who are going to grind him out and not stand with him. Michel Pereira has shot some takedowns in his career, but he's not a wrestler. You know, he doesn't have the best takedown shots. He's mostly a striker. He's become a lot more fundamental these days instead of the wild, crazy fighter we saw previously. But I'm very curious how he shows up this time against one of the most prolific strikers in UFC history, who's also a bit flashy himself. Tony Ferguson is back. He's fighting another veteran in Bobby Green. It's gonna be tough for a Tony fan to watch this. I hope he does well. Michael Chiesa versus Kevin Holland I think is a very good fight, and it's a kind of matchup for Holland to get into the top 15 if he gets a win here. Gabriel Bonfim, the younger of the two brothers, the older brother lost earlier this month. Gabriel Bonfim is undefeated. He's looking pretty good. He has a big step up in competition with Trevin Giles here. It's really going to dictate where does Gabriel Bonfim fit in his placement in the UFC. Not necessarily the rankings, but where does he actually stand in front of someone who's fought many great fighters like Trevin Giles. Derrick versus Rogerio de Lima. I mean, we already know what time it is with this one. First round knockout in Salt Lake City as well. There's no way these two are going to try to go to the third round at 4,000 feet above sea level. The game plan for both guys are probably just to be knocking each other out as fast as possible. And that is a major component about UFC 291. It's going to be in Salt Lake City, Utah, which is about 4,200 feet above sea level. This is going to drastically impact the cardio of every single fighter on this card. There are some that we just don't see really affecting that much, like Tony Ferguson, like Wonderboy, maybe Justin Gaethje, given the fact that he does train at high elevation. Derrick Lewis, no, I'm just kidding. Him and Lima are not lasting more than a round. But I would have to say that the prospect of the night, there's really only like two promising prospects, but definitely the bigger of the two is Gabriel Bonfim. Gabriel Bonfim has great boxing. He comes from the world of boxing, actually. Most of his wins are by submission. He has very sneaky and dangerous chokes, making him lethal no matter where the fight goes. On the feet, he has a boxing skill. On the ground, he has his submissions. And he's only 25 years old. He just started. He's a very promising prospect for the welterweight division. The fighter of the night, there really isn't one. I mean, it's between Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje. You could even throw in Alex Pereira or Blachowicz. Any four of these guys can claim the fighter of the night, as there's a lot of stakes on those two fights. The stake of the night, the fighter that is in hot waters, it's sad but true. Tony Ferguson is the stake of the night. He is not doing well. He's never been the same since the Justin Gaethje fight, and from a man who had the longest win streak in lightweight history to go on a 5-loss streak afterward. If he loses 6 in a row, that's probably going to be it for him. And in my opinion, he probably should have retired earlier. The banger of the night though, the most explosive fight on the whole card, is definitely Derrick versus Rogerio de Lima. I wouldn't be surprised if this fight ends in like 30 seconds. For the fact that Marcos just brings the fight to his opponent no matter who he is. Derrick is the kind of guy who likes to respond brawling. Both guys have one-punch knockout power. That fight has to end in the first round. But then again, we did say the same thing about Derrick versus Francis Ngannou. And then the fight of the night, the best overall fight on the whole card, I'm gonna have to say is the main event. Dustin Poirier versus Justin Gaethje. Both guys have greatly improved since the last time they fought each other. And more so from Gaethje's side, he has added many more wrinkles to his game compared to Dustin, who's done a lot of fine-tuning of what he already was good at. Gaethje has changed his style, right? He's not as brawling as he used to be. He's not as aggressive as he used to be. He's a lot more patient. He moves a lot more. and because of that, he's able to pace himself for 5 rounds. A very different Justin Gaethje than Dustin fought last time, and I think it's going to be an extremely technical fight, as well as exciting. And the first fight we're going to start with is that Derrick Lewis versus Rogerio de Lima fight. There's not too much to say about this one. It's a slanging and banging kind of fight that Derrick Lewis loves, and he's definitely going to get that started quickly when Marco starts throwing Brazilian bombs at his head, because that's how de Lima fights everybody. Doesn't matter what style they have, if they're a wrestler, if they're a striker, he's coming out there to take your head off at the very beginning of the fight. He starts out hot. Derrick Lewis likes to respond. Derrick Lewis is much more of a counter puncher than he is actually an aggressive puncher. He reacts more than he initiates, and I think the first collision between the two could probably spell the end of the fight. There are some questionable fights from de Lima where the fight went to a decision, he just could not last. I mean, even when the fight's in C level, the guy doesn't even have 3-round cardio. Derrick Lewis has like 2-round cardio or 2.5. He's won decisions before when the fight is at a slower pace, but de Lima doesn't fight that way. De Lima throws power punches all the time, and he's like a heavyweight version of Jessica Andrade with the way he throws punches. He usually leads with the left hook at the orthodox stance that can open him up for a right overhand or even a right straight from Derrick Lewis. I think Derrick Lewis's left high kick is actually going to be pretty interesting in this one, especially if he can get de Lima backing up a little bit. One of these days, Derrick Lewis is going to find that shin on someone's head, and maybe it's this one, but I think the major difference of the two fighters is going to be the speed of de Lima. Lewis hits harder. I don't think it's going to matter too much, because de Lima can also knock Lewis out with one punch. So if we're going to say Lewis hits harder, it doesn't really mean too much, because they both have one-punch knockout power, but the speed difference between the two is massive. De Lima is extremely fast for a heavyweight. He moves pretty quickly, and he definitely has lightning-fast hands for a heavyweight, but he doesn't have great precision. He throws winging punches all over the place. He's spamming haymakers, whereas Derrick Lewis is a lot more precise with his punches, especially that right hand of his. He doesn't use his left hand too much, other than if he's brawling with you. It's that right overhand that he likes to catch you with. That's why this fight is very hard to predict, because Derrick Lewis can knock this guy out coming in with the right hand, because Marcos throws wide punches. I would say if Derrick Lewis tightened his punches more, if he threw straights instead of overhands, I would actually probably favor him to win this. But the fact that he never throws a right straight, he throw a jab a couple times, but never a right straight. It's always a right overhand. And de Lima is shorter, so it's going to be very questionable if he's throwing overhands at the shorter guy. If he throws forward right straights, we got something here with Derrick Lewis. But if he doesn't, it's kind of up in the air. I favor de Lima in a brawl because he's just so much faster than Lewis, and he is younger in the game as well. So ultimately, my prediction for this fight, I'm going to slightly lean with Rogerio de Lima, but I am not counting out Derrick Lewis like the odds are pretty much showing here. Rogerio de Lima is a 2-1 favorite. I think it's very close to a pick'em. I like those odds for Derrick Lewis, but the best thing to bet on this fight is just for it to not go to a decision, because you never know who's going to knock out who. And then we go to Gabriel Bonfim versus Trevin Giles. This is going to be an interesting fight, and I'm very curious to see what Bonfim is made of in front of a guy who's, I mean, look who Giles has beaten already. He beat Roman Dolidze, he beat James Krause, he beat Ryan Spann. He's beaten fighters who have competed in 4 different weight classes. Roman Dolidze was a middleweight, Ryan Spann, light heavyweight, and before he was a middleweight when he fought Trevin Giles. James Krause was a lightweight and a welterweight. Those are some fantastic wins, man. Now, both fighters are mostly strikers, but they could do everything, right? Trevin Giles has become much more of a well-rounded fighter. Gabriel Bonfim has great submissions as well as his boxing skill to rely on. In his UFC debut, he was throwing a bit too wild. I've seen his boxing fights, I've seen his fights even before the UFC, and he was a lot more composed and patient with his boxing. I think the jitters got to him. He's only 25 years old. And I think this time we're going to see a much more composed Gabriel Bonfim, who has an excellent left hook, very good on the jab. His combinations, I think, are going to give Trevin Giles the most issues here. And I'm very curious to see if he's going to throw more kicks in this fight, just to mix it up a bit in the striking. If Trevin Giles ever shoots in for a takedown, he's going to get himself into some trouble with those chokes from Bonfim. And Trevin Giles loves to keep his hands low. That is worrisome. Gabriel Bonfim can really mix up the body shots and the head shots to just condition that further for Trevin Giles to open up his head for the left hook or even the right cross. But the thing is, Trevin Giles throws very long punches with his chin up in the air a bit. If Bonfim can just slip and evade those shots, he has the perfect openings for counter punches to hurt Trevin Giles at every given moment of the fight. So ultimately, my prediction for this fight, because of the defenselessness of Trevin Giles in the stand-up, and he might shoot in a takedown at some point in the fight if he's losing it, I just see him falling into too much danger against Gabriel Bonfim and losing the fight due to a second-round TKO. I'm very curious to see if Bonfim's cardio is going to be pretty good for Salt Lake City. And as you can see, Bonfim is over 3-1 favorite. I don't know about 3-1 favorite because Trevin Giles has been around for a little bit. He's fought some really good guys, but I definitely do pick him to win. And then we go to Michael Chiesa versus Kevin Holland, a grappler versus striker matchup. Or at least you would think so. Kevin Holland has been working on his grappling a lot more these days. Didn't really make too much of a difference in the Hamzat fight, and he had to have learned something from that, right? He was looking to retire from that loss, so I don't even know how much he learned from it. It looked like it devastated him a bit mentally. And if he did not get past that mental block, I think something similar might happen again with Michael Chiesa. Michael Chiesa is a very good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artist. He does get himself into some danger when he's going up against other grapplers, so his grappling defense is actually not nearly as good as his grappling offense. But against Kevin Holland, who doesn't really have too many notable submission wins in the UFC and doesn't really go for them too much. He's usually just trying to break posture, strike off his back and stuff like that. I think Michael Chiesa is going to be ready for all of it. I think he's going to get as close to Kevin Holland as possible, restrict all that space, and probably looking for like an arm triangle if he gets him to the ground. And Michael Chiesa is the bigger fighter, which is very interesting. So he was coming up from lightweight. Michael Chiesa used to be a 155er. Kevin Holland was a 185er. They're meeting each other at 170. And Michael Chiesa is the bigger man. He was reportedly weighing at 188 pounds cage weight. In the cage, he weighs 188 pounds. Kevin Holland weighs 186 pounds walking around. That's not even just in the cage. We can only imagine that Michael Chiesa is like 200 pounds walking around. He is massive. And I think there might be a bit of a strength difference that Michael Chiesa can work with here, as Kevin Holland's takedown defense is not really that good. It's gotten better, but it's not that great. I think Chiesa can get him down with some body locks, trip him out, and then try to transition into an arm triangle. Get away from the striking as much as possible because Kevin Holland is going to destroy him in the stand-up. Chiesa can surprise you just how he dropped Jorge Masvidal back in the day. Nobody really expects too much out of Chiesa in the stand-up, but he definitely has some good power. Kevin Holland has a great chin though. He took some massive shots from Wonderboy and still never got knocked out. If Kevin Holland could defend all the takedowns, Michael Chiesa is going to be in some big trouble because I think he could put down Chiesa with one shot. He has a massive reach advantage. He's a little bit taller. He's extremely precise with the right hand. And I think he's going to try to look for some uppercuts here and there after feeling out the timing of the takedowns from Chiesa. But ultimately my prediction for this fight, I'm going to go with the underdog. I'm going to go with Michael Chiesa here. I think he will be able to take the fight to the ground, show a little bit of his strength to get it down there, be ready for all of Kevin Holland striking off his back, transition through and eventually get into that arm triangle position, or potentially just land ground and pound shots and then get his back or something, getting a second round submission. There is one big thing going for Kevin Holland though. He does have better cardio than Chiesa. So if it goes into the third round, Chiesa could be in some trouble. Then we go to Tony Ferguson versus Bobby Green. I'm a fan of both guys. I do not want to see Ferguson get beat up again. Both guys are older. They've been in the UFC for a very, very long time, have fought some of the best fighters. They both almost combined 80 fights. That is insane, man. And I'm very surprised they haven't fought each other in the past. Now, we all know that Tony Ferguson is not the same guy. He's so much slower. He's so sluggish out there. After the Michael Chandler knockout, it's like he lost his athleticism as well. Tony aged like 20 years. From the Chandler fight to the Nate Diaz fight, he physically did not look like the same guy. He wasn't moving the same. He looked a lot more unathletic. Looked like his back was going to give out or something, you know? It's sad to see what's happened to Tony Ferguson. And Bobby Green's pretty old as well, but he has not aged like Tony at all. This guy's still good and dangerous. He has pretty good boxing, slick defense, good power, and I think it's just going to be way too much for Tony Ferguson. I'm not agreeing with that minus 384 because Bobby Green is not some young, hungry guy who's reaching his prime or something. Bobby Green's been long in the tooth, but I definitely do favor him to win this fight. I'm going to pick Bobby Green, and I'm going to go by a decision win. I think both guys have pretty good cardio. Tony's definitely going to have the cardio advantage. Maybe Bobby Green starts gassing out in like the middle of the third round, but I'm really hoping Tony shows up, man. If that could possibly happen. And then we go to Stephen Thompson versus Michel Pereira. This is another older guy, but looking amazing. I mean, his performance against Kevin Holland was spectacular. It was such a great striking display. Wonderboy was faster than Holland. He's still looking very athletic, very powerful with his shots, precise, technical, even advancing in his game. Overall, he's gonna have the striking advantage over Michel Pereira. Pereira has the power though. He is a mutant of an athlete. But Pereira has toned a lot of that down. He's not going out there somersaulting, flipping for the rolling thunder and doing crazy stuff. He's pacing himself a lot more, but still doesn't have the greatest cardio. At Salt Lake City, I see Michel Pereira gassing out in the middle of the second round, and I think Wonderboy starts picking him apart. He opens himself way too much. He has a good front kick. He has a good long jab, a dynamic right straight. I think that's the biggest thing going for him, are those right straights if he can catch Wonderboy early. But I think Wonderboy is so intelligent. He's going to take the first round a little bit slow. A lot of feints to overload the nervous system to get him to start gassing out. Throwing some early head kicks to get Pereira to react. And that's going to cause Pereira to go after Wonderboy, leading Pereira right into counter shots and just further gassing him out. And I think eventually Stephen Thompson is going to beat Michel Pereira by a third round TKO. Then we go to the co-main event. Jan Blachowicz versus Alex Pereira. Man, I am super excited about this fight. Alex Pereira's been showing up a lot of training videos. The guy's looking like an absolute monster in the gym right now. Blachowicz is a lot more discreet. I wonder what he's working on. It should be the wrestling, because he could do something in the striking. He has the power, but the path of least resistance at high elevation would be the wrestling. Blachowicz is an experienced grappler. He's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Alex Pereira is a striker who just started grappling. There's a difference between striking cardio and grappling cardio. I don't even think Pereira's gonna have the grappling cardio to go 3 rounds at high elevation. If Blachowicz can shoot in the double legs, get Pereira to the ground, grind it out, land big ground and pound shots, soften him up, force Pereira to give up his back, and go in for the rear naked choke, that's probably his way of winning this. Now, if Alex Pereira can stuff the takedowns, it's going to hurt his gas tank a little bit. I think Blachowicz definitely has the better cardio of the two, but I wonder when Pereira's going to start lining up knees and uppercuts if he starts defending them first. Because when he starts defending the takedown, he's going to get a feeling for it. And we all know how precise Pereira is with his strikes. If he gets used to the takedowns, Blachowicz's takedowns are going to be very dangerous from the goal for if he doesn't set them up the correct way. But the thing about Blachowicz is, he does set him up sometimes, like he did against Israel Adesanya. He will throw up the jab, throw up high feints to go under for the double leg. But Jan may have been trolling all of us when he said that he's going to stand up with Pereira and test his own striking. If he does that, I see him losing the fight. He has that left hook opening, he always drops his right hand when he's throwing punches, specifically when he's throwing his own left hand, and we know Pereira is the taller and longer guy with better footwork, and also way faster than Blachowicz. Blachowicz is one of the slower light heavyweights. If he throws out the left hand like that, Pereira's going to counter him with the left hook and put him down. One shot from Pereira can end this fight, but it goes the other way around. Blachowicz also has a very powerful left hook and a good right hook as well. I think Pereira's going to expect the checking of kicks. Blachowicz's defense is very much underrated when it comes to checking kicks and against jabs and stuff like that. A big advantage for Pereira is that he's been training with Glover Teixeira, who has a win over Blachowicz, and they devised a game plan for left hooks against Blachowicz that was very successful. And we know that Alex Pereira has a much better left hook than Glover Teixeira in every way. I am quite shocked that the actual odds are almost a pick'em, but I am ultimately going to favor Jan Blachowicz in this fight, and I'm going to go by a third round submission. I think Pereira's going to start gassing out in the third. I think he's going to give up his back from the takedowns. Even if he starts defending them early, like in the first, he defends like a few of them. I think in the third round, Blachowicz is going to get him to the ground because of how tired Pereira is going to start getting. But this could be a rather difficult fight if Blachowicz gets his takedown stuffed or he doesn't shoot enough takedowns. There have been many fights where a fighter had a clear wrestling advantage and they just did not shoot takedowns. And for that, they lost the fight. Yoel Romero in his last one in Bellator was a clear example of that. Blachowicz is a lot smarter though. He has attempted takedowns against most guys who he should be attempting them against. So I do expect him to do it in this fight. And then we go to the main event. Dustin Poirier versus Justin Gaethje 2. Both guys in the primes of their careers, both 34 years old, a lot of experience in MMA, a lot of knockouts between each other. Look at that, 15 for Dustin, 18 for Justin. Dustin goes for a lot more submissions. And when you look at the weight, Dustin Poirier walks around at 181 pounds. That is in shape though. Justin Gaethje is 173 in the cage. So I can only imagine Dustin's around the same. These two guys are not going to have too many differences when it comes to like physical attributes. Gaethje's a little bit taller, but Dustin has the reach advantage, so it kind of all plays out together. Now Justin has evolved a bit more as a fighter than Dustin has, in terms of he's made a lot more changes to his own game. He's not as aggressive as he used to be. He's a lot more patient these days, moving around away from you, and he's a lot more mindful of his leg kicks. He's not just going to hammer away like he did in their last fight. Justin Gaethje, recklessly throwing leg kicks at Dustin Poirier, actually lost him the fight. Yes, they're doing quite a bit of damage, but when he kicked Dustin with an inside leg kick, because they are opposite stance fighters, Gaethje's power leg is going to kick on the inside of Poirier's lead leg. Whenever that happens, Poirier's using that blowback to step in for his left hand. And that's actually what caused the finishing sequence as well. Left hand placed right on Gaethje's chin, and the same thing is going to happen again if Gaethje does not carefully place his leg kicks. In the pocket, Dustin Poirier definitely has a big advantage over Gaethje. He has much better fundamental boxing. He has excellent shots around the guard. Gaethje still does shell up like he showed against Rafael Fiziev. And Poirier's definitely going to land just like last time, right through the guard every single time. The right hooks around it, the left straights through it, the uppercuts, the body shots. And that's another thing that Poirier didn't go for as much as he probably will this time. Body shots against Gaethje. If he starts shelling up, rip that left hand to the liver. This isn't high elevation, so a lot of body shots are going to really take its toll on whoever's landing them. Gaethje doesn't throw a lot of body shots. He's mostly headhunting or kicking your legs. Poirier will mix up a lot of stuff on you. Now the thing is, Justin Gaethje does have a bit of an advantage with training at high elevation for such a long time. He used to gas out before, but his cardio has improved leaps and bounds ever since. We haven't even seen him gas out to that extent ever since like the Michael Johnson fight, or even the first Dustin Poirier fight. Dustin Poirier doesn't train at high elevation, so he might actually feel the effects more so than Justin Gaethje does. Does that mean that Gaethje is going to start out a little bit quicker to test Poirier's cardio and drag him into deep waters? That is going to be interesting. Dustin though did fight one time at high elevation. One time, he fought in Calgary. That's when he defeated Eddie Alvarez, but he did it in the second round, so the fight didn't even go that long. We didn't get to see the extent of his cardio. It was a fast-paced fight. He was throwing out long stretched-out combinations on Eddie Alvarez and TKO'd him, but he didn't even go to the third round, let alone 5. And we know that both Dustin and Justin are very hard to knock out. So we talk about in the pocket, Dustin definitely has a major advantage there. Justin Gaethje likes to swing out big shots. Sometimes he still wings out that big left hook if he's getting smothered by output, just to break the pressure. But he is a lot more precise these days, like the uppercuts and the jabs he was throwing at Rafael Fiziev, something we didn't see from the Justin Gaethje that fought Poirier. But here's the thing now, at long range, it definitely favors Justin Gaethje, a lot more this time than it did before. The reason for that is, he moves a lot. Poirier is a plotter. Poirier slowly walks at you. Justin Gaethje is pretty athletic with his footwork. He can move around all over the place, and the best thing going for him is drawing Poirier into his own counter shots. If he can feint or throw some jabs and get Poirier to bite on it, and Poirier throws out like a long left straight or that shift combination that he's known for, that's actually a big thing going for Gaethje to move away from that and counter him with a planting right hand. Very similar actually to what he did against Tony Ferguson. It's going to be difficult to get Dustin to do that, right? It's going to be difficult to draw him out as he's going to put a pressure on Gaethje. He's very smart. He's very careful with his outside work. He will shift in when he's fighting guys like Max Holloway or something, knowing that Max is not going to deal well with that kind of pressure. Justin Gaethje will, right? Gaethje will throw back. He will try to counter you. He will try to beat you in exchanges. And Dustin knows that from fighting him the first time and then watching him what he's done throughout his career. So ultimately, my prediction for this fight, I'm going to go with Dustin Poirier. And I'm going to go by a third round TKO. I think he's going to find his shots. Like I've mentioned before, Dustin has made a lot of fine tuning to his style. Every single skill that he has been amplified. Whereas for Gaethje, not as much. Gaethje has changed what he's done. He's fine-tuned some things, especially, working with the jab and the uppercuts. His leg kicks are better than before. But his boxing overall, as a general landscape, has not evolved to the level of Poirier's. Right? He still does a lot of things that are wild and kind of head-scratching. Whereas Poirier is continually showing himself to be one of the best boxers ever in the UFC, and constantly is just getting better at it. Even dealing with powerhouses like Michael Chandler, he got hit a couple times, but all began because of a headbutt. We got all his wits about him. He was destroying Michael Chandler, even in that first round, landing huge shots on him. Or if Dustin's fighting technical boxers like Conor McGregor, he's fought different kind of style of punchers, and I think he's going to get down the distance work of Justin Gaethje moving around and crowd him against the fence. If Gaethje's ever backed up to the fence and Poirier has him zoned in there, Gaethje's going to be in a lot of trouble. Just like everybody is against Poirier. Poirier is one of the scariest fighters in the world when he has you trapped up against the fence and he's unloading you with combinations. Because not only is he demolishing you, he's also very focused and keen of evading your own counterpunches to stop this whole output. One of the biggest things going for Justin Gaethje are the outside leg kicks with the lead leg, but if Poirier's pressuring him, it's really going to get Gaethje backing up. And not only that, that does line up a potential left straight if Dustin can fire it out there quick enough, or a right hook over the top. At the same time, Gaethje is throwing that outside leg kick. Because the outside leg kick for Gaethje is going to be with his lead leg. So ultimately, I am going to go with Dustin yet again, defeating Justin Gaethje. I think it's going to be a rather difficult fight, but I see his shot selection being a bit too much for Justin Gaethje. But as you can see from the betting odds, Dustin and Justin is pretty close, but they are a bit farther apart than the first time they fought each other. In their first fight, Dustin was a minus 130, not a minus 153. So that win and everything else they've done in their careers has bumped them up a little bit more as a favorite, but it should still be a competitive fight. And if you want to go and capitalize on these odds, as well as the Wonderboy fight or the Pereira fight, which is a really interesting lineup, Tony Ferguson being a massive underdog, Michael Chiesa pulling off the upset, Derrick Lewis getting the big upset, that's one that can absolutely happen. To capitalize on all of these, make sure to go to mybookie.ag, where they have the best lines and they're constantly moving. This Pereira and Blachowicz fight specifically has been moving a lot lately. Jan was a bigger favorite than he is now. The gap has closed to almost a pick'em. They are nearly even on the odds, making it a battleground on the bets. For everybody pulling for Jan Blachowicz, I think you're not going to get better odds than right now, as Alex Pereira has been shrinking as an underdog, and when you go to the methods of victory, The one that's least likely, but I think can absolutely happen, is Blachowicz winning by a submission. That's a plus 560. They're saying it's even less likely than a knockout win or a decision win. Look at that plus 2100 for Pereira to win by a submission. We have to look straight away at that Derrick Lewis and Marcos Rogerio de Lima fight. As you can see, Derrick Lewis is a 2-1 underdog, but he's one punch away from ending that fight, and de Lima's not like a technical fighter whatsoever. He can definitely run into a right hand. His speed advantage should pull him ahead, but the odds do seem a little bit too one-sided. But most of the odds are pretty spot on, so if you look at these, man, it's really hard to go wrong on this. So I would say the locks of the card, the fighters that are most likely going to win, are Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, Jake Matthews, and Miranda Maverick. These are fighters that are most likely going to win their fights. The dogs of the card, I think Michael Chiesa is one of the better dogs of the card, and Derrick Lewis does have a shot, for sure. The other one I'm looking at is Uros Medic, who's a pretty sizable underdog. That's an interesting one to do a little bit more research on, because I don't think Medic is like gonna clearly like dominate or something like that. Matthew Semmelsberger is no joke whatsoever. I think the fight is closer to a pick'em, but I do pick Medic to win. And when you go to mybookie.ag, make sure to sign up for the deposit bonus. Will it match up your first deposit all the way up to $1,000? So if you put like $100 or something like that, they give you another 100 to play with. Just like everywhere else, it's going to come with a withdrawal rollback requirement, and in order to activate this, make sure to use the promo code WEASEL, that's WEASLE, to take advantage of MyBookie's sign-up offer. Make sure to visit mybookie.ag today, where you can win big. There are also other fights going on, like the boxing fight between Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford. Terrence Crawford is a favorite going into it, so that is also something you could look up as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed the predictions, and if you did, make sure to give this a thumbs up. Enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe. Leave in the comments below, what are your guys' predictions? Who do you think is going to win the fight? How are these fights going to end? And I'll see you guys in the next video.